Good day, wherever you're tuning in from, and welcome to this Pathways to 17 panel session titled Digital Public Infrastructure in Practice, African Case Studies of Implementation. I'm Nanjira Sambuli, a tech policy researcher and analyst from Kenya, and I will be the session moderator. Africa's diverse experiences in implementing digital public infrastructure, or DPI, offer valuable lessons for advancing inclusion, innovation, and efficiency. Drawing from unique national contexts, these panelists will describe and discuss the successes and challenges they've encountered in rolling out digital identity systems, payment platforms, and data exchanges, which are widely considered the three key pillars of DPI. This session will highlight how different governance environments, accountability mechanisms, and local priorities influence DPI outcomes. And we hope that you who are listening in will gain an understanding of how African countries are navigating the complexities of implementing DPI, the innovations driving these efforts, and the opportunities and risks that arise. The session will also explore how regional collaboration and shared knowledge can further strengthen DPI initiatives across the continent. In conversation with me today are distinguished representatives from 4 African governments who share their insights into their country's DPI journeys. We are delighted to have Solomon Richardson, the head of the Technical Services Department within the National Information Technology Agency, or NITA, which is the ICT regulator for Ghana, and also the agency within government responsible for digitalization. He has over 16 years of post-qualification experience in IT, telecom management, largely in the public sector. Among his many other accomplishments, Solomon spends a lot of time sharing Ghana's digital journey experience with other African countries to help them approach the implementation in a more cost-effective manner. We also have Rosemary Kisembo, who's the Executive Director of the National Identification and Registration Authority, NIRA, in Uganda. She is a software engineer and seasoned IT project lead with over 25 years experience. And in conversation with Rosemary, she's busy implementing a new digital ID while transitioning from a legacy one. So we look forward to hearing about that. Last but not least, we're joined by Yoda Michael, who's the Executive Director at the Ethiopian National ID Program that is transforming the nation's digital ID landscape and building the nation's digital economy. He also serves as a Deputy Director General at INSA, which is the Information Network Security Administration, and has over 15 years of experience as a technology advisor, automation engineer, and technical consultant. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'll start with the first question to both you, Rosemary and Solomon, around what is the understanding of digital public infrastructure within your country or agency's context? Solomon, let's start with you.
Thank you very much for having me. I think that when the word or the buzz phrase digital public infrastructure came about, a lot of us were wondering what it was, trying to understand what exactly that concept was. I think in attending a lot of workshops and seeing that, we realized that, okay, it wasn't so much different from what we were already doing, just a bit of fine tuning. So we now, from those kind of things, understood that, okay, so the digital public infrastructure is deploying your digital infrastructure in such a manner that it is reusable, that it is more open, that it is other people can tap into it. Both public, private can all ride on it. And so you don't have the same infrastructure duplicated with different technology solutions all across. But once you deploy it in such a manner that even if it is deployed in government, the private sector can equally leverage on it and then integrate it with their systems and stuff like that to use it. Our understanding was, in deploying it in that manner, it hastens your digitalization initiatives, and it's also cost effective. So from there, we now saw that, okay, maybe we should now pay more attention to it. We were not deliberate about it, but now we need to be more deliberate about it. So for us as a country, we now see this as a more cost-effective approach, a standardized approach of deploying digital infrastructure for inclusiveness, and then also for cost effectiveness. That is our understanding as a country. Thank you.
Thank you so much for framing it that way. Rosemary, I reckon you will have some similarities, but let's hear your perspective from Uganda.
Well, I will use the imagery of a road. because public infrastructure, before it became digital public infrastructure, was understood to be services that are accessed by all and in a standard sort of form. In essence, I'll give if you wanted to join to the water system, you had certain parameters or certain defined ways of doing so, and you got exactly the same service that your neighbor got. If you were riding on a highway, you just needed to have certain tires, certain requirements, and you enjoyed the same experience as the rest of the world or the rest of your neighbors enjoyed. So I think our understanding really derives from that. Public infrastructure is for all, to be accessed by all, and with ease, and should be scaled, like how you increase the lanes across a road. You should scale, it should be able to, you could expand it or you could reduce it. Just as there may be a couple of inroads into the main road, it should have ways of living and ways of coming on with such ease. There should be guardrails or security and privacy, just like you have security and privacy on the guardrails and all sorts of things to keep everybody safe, because assets used by all have to define, limits and boundaries for all and by all. And I think a perfect example is the internet. I don't know what computer you're using. I don't know what program you're using, but based on some shared simple protocols, we are able to successfully communicate over the internet. So to give a bit of history to the definition, when digitalization began in the country, or digitization, whichever school of thought you come from, people had systems that were not able to, for lack of a technical lingua, to speak to each other. If I was to put it as simple, the exchange of information was first based on electronic document interchange. You had to have the same format, but as technology morphed, we began to see this JSON, these text formats, XML was the first, had its heavy footprint. But as we began to grow, we began to see exchange of information being eased and facilitating integration and cooperation for all. So our journey for public infrastructure actually began from the customs and cross-border trade, where they had to have a shared format of a document in order for them to speak to each other. But that has since morphed, and now you just define a standard. Everyone agrees to it. A method is created, it's invoked, you consume it according to your specification. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And it's always nice to have an analogical history that helps us all understand. And maybe, Rosemary, just sticking with you, talk to us more about one of the major not new, but DPIs that you're working on in the context, I think, of NERA, how the ID project is, where possible, adopting the DPI approach.
Okay, one of the chief cornerstones of DPI, as defined internationally, is open standards. And the story of our new infrastructure, our new ID system, it was public infrastructure, but it was not built on open standards. It was proprietary in nature. And we recorded a lot of pain in vendor lock-in, which is a story of many, It was a very good tool, I need to emphasize, but change was so painful. Change required in terms of cost and time. So when we heard about MOSIP, the modular open source identification platform, it was music to our ears because of the fact that the standards were generally open. Of course, I don't want to say that they are all open. because there's still proprietary technology in signing and encryption. There's still proprietary technology in ABIS or biometric identification systems. So that was an aspect that our new infrastructure now, our new system is embracing. We're saying, yes, we want scalability, we want interoperability, but we also want open standards that will allow us to grow and change as rapidly as we are growing and changing. Africa has defined her vision in Agenda 2063 and said they want inclusive growth and sustainability. But goal number two is an integrated continent. And we thought we should take a step forward to preparing our country for an integrated continent. So we've started with the identification platform. Government is also in the process of acquiring another open standards switch for the payment platform. So in essence, we are looking at a scenario whereby we are ready to spread out our arms and embrace Africa.
Lovely. And we'll speak more about that. And I know that there's a third pillar that Uganda is embracing open source, which is the data exchange with UG Hub, which is also fascinating, following the same protocol of openness and interoperability. Solomon, when we turn to Ghana, talk to us about what DPIs you're sort of implementing and scaling over there.
Yeah, so maybe we're late in embracing a DPI as it's been standardized now. Just as I said earlier, we're doing our own thing, but we're not very conscious about the DPI. But since we became much conscious about it, we've streamlined things right now. So we look at DPI right now in two approaches. We look at it at the national level and we look at it within government. So we look at it at the national level and we look at it within government. I will take the government area first. So within government, what we've done is we look at activities, processes that cut across government, and then we deploy it as a DPI. So take, for instance, what we call government virtual office. So for government virtual office, for instance, that has email, calendaring system, correspondence management, document management system. We put it together as a suite, and then we deploy it as one at the center of government infrastructure. And every government agency is just provisioned, and then they log on and use it. So we don't have different government agencies deploying their own email, all those sort of things. We don't do that. Take HR. HR happens across government. So it doesn't make sense having different government agencies looking for their own HR solution. So we have deployed what we call the HR system, which all government agencies use. Government collection in terms of revenue. We've just deployed a payment gateway that now is mandatory that every government agency, so far as you does collection in one form or the other, that is the platform you use for your collection. So that is how we are doing it. So we're identifying all these services, activities that we think cut across all government, then we deploy it as a DPI for all government institutions to get on and use it. So this is what is happening. So we have a number of such platforms right now within government that all you have to do is that send an email, then we onboard you. If we find out that you're a government organization, you are not connected yet, we reach out to you and then you get onboarded, to the point that even now it's being made as part of the CEO's appraisal, to make sure that as many of these things that you're onboarded is part of your appraisal. Procurement, for instance, we have a centralized procurement platform for government that all these government institutions are now using to do that. I'm sure a lot of countries, one that a lot of countries have is the IFMIS, and that a lot of countries that have similar approach. So that is at the government level. Now, when you come to the national level, which include both public and the private sector, of course, you've mentioned the ID system. Yes, Ghana has been able to successfully deploy our ID system. We've deployed as a DPI. The enrollment as at now is around 18 million out of about 32 million citizens. We have integrated it into all sectors, the financial sector, security sector. We've done, I'm sure that as we talk about, I'll go deep into it. We've done the integration, the enrollment. There was mass enrollment. So we gave a period where everybody was supposed to enroll, did it as if we're doing election registration, where we deployed all the infrastructure nationwide. Closer, we used the election approach and then just enrolled. We started enrolling from 15 years and above. Right now, we are about 90 something percent done with it. We've now started the 15 years and below that we are now enrolling them. Babies at birth has also started. That now when babies are at birth, they are given a unique number. Details are taken. When they go to some stage and their bios are well formed, they come for those bios to be picked. So that is what we've done with that. The payment, yes, we've also been quite successful, I should say, with the payment one. What we did was when we had this mobile money coming in, all the telcos rolling out mobile money. Already we had an interoperability switch for the banking system. We already had that one in place. So in 2017, when all this mobile money thing came, government quickly put together the mobile money interoperability switch that allows movement of money, exchange of money very easily across whichever platform, telco you are subscribed to, you're able to do that. Then we now connected the banking switch to the mobile interoperability switch. So it allows you to move money from mobile to mobile, mobile to bank, and then all across like that. So right now, it is what is now growing our fintech, because now the fintech, all they have to do is to plug in at the interoperability point, and then they don't need to do all the heavy works. And then they now just build their innovation on top of whatever already exists. So this is what has happened in Ghana. On the side of data exchange, we are now actually working on data exchange. We started the process of rolling out the data exchange. We started the process of getting a vendor that we're going to work with. But of course, we are going with the open source approach to make sure that, once the data exchange platform is there, once you identify your use case, because it's open source, you can just build your workflow across it, and then you should be fine. So that is what we are doing with our DPI, the 3 pillars, as you mentioned.
Lovely. Thank you so much for painting that picture. And I just stay with you, Solomon, for a second. You mentioned something that was interesting around deploying the registration drive for the ID, almost the way you would an election. And I was just wondering, and then because Rosemary also teed us beautifully around the idea of these DPIs helping with ease and scalability. With Ghana, for example, going towards an election, does the Ghana card, which is the national ID card, then allow anyone who's over 18 to be qualified as a registered voter, or how does that then play out towards the ease of then going into other processes such as voter registration? I was just curious as an aside.
We have a very interesting case in our end where there was a huge standoff about a year or two ago. And the national ID said, we are ready. Everything is in place. All you have to do is, because we had already integrated our national ID with the banking system, with the insurance system, with the securities, or with the telco system, that integration was done. National ID said, we can do such same integration with the electoral database. First, you do the integration and you clean the data. Then now, when anybody is 18, they don't need any plenty things. Data is just pushed. And then if there is some add-on data, it is added at the Electoral Commission over there. Our political parties said, no, we don't think you are ready. A whole lot of things. There was a big fight about it. And for obvious reasons, elections in Africa, it is a high stake. Every single move is suspicious. Everybody is suspecting the other party. So I think what has been agreed is that, look, let this election, which is about a month away, let us go through this election, because we don't want you tampering with a system that has been built over years and we trust that system. Let us finish with that. Right after we finish the election, do the integration, let us use it for lower level elections, like district level election and things like that, and see if there are any challenges. Then we'll be able to clean it before we reach a major 4-year cycle election, the presidential and parliamentary. So it's not like we are now experimenting. So with all the hula baroo and all the fight going about, as a nation, I think what we've agreed with is that, yes, the best approach is to integrate the electoral one with the national ID, but the timing is such that it might bring chaos. So we will go through this life cycle. Then after that, we integrate the two databases, and then the national ID will be the basic ID that is being used. We'll use it for lower level elections, which normally comes way earlier than the major election. Then after that, we can now look at using it for maybe the next 4 years. That is our approach that we've adopted. Thank you.
Great, that's wonderful, and I think it starts to speak to some of the lessons that are being learned around this, digital public infrastructure implementation. Often, we talk about the technical side of it, but we have to think about the practicalities, the politics of the place that you're actually deploying, as well as just societal challenges. And Rosemary, I want to switch to you and talk about, you talked about ease, and there's what are the lessons are emerging in Uganda? And I even want to start by pivoting on asking how you're finding the trustworthiness or the trust aspect between citizens and governments when new systems like these are being deployed or rejigged.
ID has survived 2 elections. It has worked for 2 elections, 2016 and 2021, and is going to be at the center of 2026 as well. Of course, the start was not easy, but I think that there's the legal and policy framework have worked well together to anchor some of the technology changes. And I'll give a simple example. For example, in 2026, they're hoping to do biometric verification when you come to the polling station. So there's a legal instrument that has gone ahead before it becomes a controversial topic, passed and agreed. And but also the financial sector has helped anchor the ID card. It has helped make it trust. Actually, we have 60% of Ugandans on the register. We also started from an election perspective. We have 27.4 million persons on the register. Our ID initially started in 2014-15, preparing for elections. Now, the financial sector picked it up. Why? It was the only register that had biometrics. Because of the presence of biometrics, it became a go-to register. All other registers had unique numbers, TIN, LIN, BIN, RIN, whatever. They all had a unique number that identified a person. But the National Identification Register had biometrics. So the first thing that happened is that policy now began to require everybody to link to the National Identification Register. So in essence, the first people to clean up their register and link up with us was public service. So if you were a public servant, you were required to register with, to have a NIN to be on the roll. And they gave some time, and that's after they removed those who didn't have. So they were also forced to get. Then we moved to the telecom sector in 2018. It became, if you had a phone, you had to have a NIN. And that one came from a security perspective. So that has been well anchored and very well received, and has resulted in the proliferation of mobile money to all levels, because now it was easy to know that Rosemary, NIN of this SIM, committed this crime on this platform. So the financial sector was, the embracing of this by the financial sector has made it even stronger, even better, because it's now Uganda's ID is demand driven. It's not NIRA striving to give, please have a card. No, now people are desperate to get a card. And as I have said, we've moved to the 15 and below. We did that about 2 years ago. We now 6.3% of our register is from 0 to, and it's also having its gains. But in essence, other services like what you mentioned, the UG Hub. UG Hub also, from a government perspective, brought government together. But the fundamental thing about UG Hub was, look, we have enough of spaghetti APIs all over the place. Can we have a place where all APIs meet and shake hands, so that we have a standard for definition of the way a government API must look like and the way it must exchange data? So that one also was fundamental for us, because it began to give structure to interoperability. Because otherwise, from a security perspective, with different standards for APIs, you have someone's is not secure, another one is secure, another one is losing data, another one is issuing, it is not data protected. So in essence, the UG Hub was like, great, we have scalability and interoperability are important, but they must have security wrapped around them and defined and well coordinated and orchestrated. We are now striving to move to orchestration, because data exchange is one stage, but move to a stage of orchestration. And what do I mean? Instead of you going and they pull your data, I send your data and your document is created with the additional data from the other side. That is our new, our new baby that we are driving towards. Of course, there are risks, I must say, since we don't have time, a lot of time left. This sort of services brings a single point of failure. Because if NIRA service is down, you are affecting so many entities. So it is driving the need for the services that anchor technology to also improve. It's driving businesses around cloud, tier 2 data centers, tier 2 to tier 3 data centers, and that sort of thing to anchor these innovations. There's the latest cry among the young people, and that's digital sovereignty. The reason that we are going to more and more to the open standards is to begin the slow but steady journey for digital sovereignty. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rosemary. I wish we had more time to dive into that, as well as cybersecurity concerns. But let me come back to you, Solomon, as well, and as a parting shot to both of you. Where do you think, you talked about, having to cascade or scale to the sub-national level towards elections, for example, in the Ghana context, but we're talking about also the continental level. And, Rosemary pointed out, the integration of a continent is a priority. And systems like these, ideally, should be helping us get closer. What do you think, as a sort of moonshot, and maybe I'll also pose the same question to Rosemary, would it take for the Ghana card to enable travel to East Africa and vice versa? And I say East Africa because at least Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda have an interoperability. So we're able to travel using our IDs, both analog and now digital. But what do you think would take for something like that to start happening? Maybe it's Ghana and Uganda, or Ghana and elsewhere. What are you seeing? And I think, Rosemary, vice versa. What levels of confidence do you think your governments are looking at to make these IDs interoperable across the continent?
So interestingly enough, there's a conversation around this already. And we are not even just looking at national ID, just the national ID, but going beyond a citizen document in general, looking at other citizen document in general. So I think at our last ICAO session, ICAO PKD session, that's the wing of ICAO that deals with digital certificates and the rest. What African countries have started coming together to do is that in Ghana, for instance, we have deployed the national PKI, the root national PKI. Government has given every government agency as a policy that is involved, that handles a citizen document. Now, by end of 2015, every citizen document should be digitally signed through the use of PKI. Now, what we will do with that is that we will now create a public key directory where we have all these signed documents, within that directory, meaning that you have digital version of all these important documents, and then they can easily be shared. Now, we now want to elevate the sharing of the information at the African level. So if I have my, let's take the national ID, for instance, and then I've created a master list of the keys. All I can do is through bilateral means, probably share with Kenya. But if we elevate the conversation further, then not just bilateral, but at the African level, we can create a directory where we share, we connect all the master list to it, and then everybody can verify. So now, when once I have my national ID that is within the national ID of Ghana has that list, Kenya is able to hit and verify whether any ID that has been presented to them is okay. Not just national ID, but look at something like health information, vaccination. We are all going around carrying our yellow cards. But can someone now just verify yellow card when I enter into South Africa, when I enter into Kenya, and you want to verify what these things? So we now want to go further and make sure that, and we think that the easiest way to do this is through using of PKI and then now signing all these documents. And the very moment you sign them, that means that it is very difficult for people to fake it and things like that. So once we sign these things and then we share the master list, either through bilateral means will be a bit difficult because now I have to 54 countries, I have to have a bilateral agreement with all of them to share this master list. But at ICAO level, all they have done is created PKD that all of us connect to. The more like a data exchange at that level that all of us connect to, our master list is shared over there. You are able to hit and query it, and then you're able to authenticate it. So that is the next level that we think that we are looking at as Ghana. And the interesting thing is that at Ghana, I'm collaborating with Kenya. I'm collaborating with a number of Uganda is part of it, and that we are already having this conversation to use the PKI platform, which we've also tried to deploy that in a DPI manner, so that we can share that master list within country and then at the global level. And I think that we are there now. We should now push at it and then make sure that we get this done within the shortest possible time, because an integrated Africa cannot be underestimated. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Rosemary will give you the final word.
Thank you. I think, as I have highlighted, technology is ready. It's now policy, and African Union needs to get into this conversation. It's already done with passports, if you know what I mean. It's already done with passports. So it's just making that data, using the same concept around passports for identification. And at the heart of the passport story is PKI. The question I have is, certain things also have to be done. And I will ask, the passport says every passport has a date of birth, has a first name, has a surname, and has certain, that data set needs to be defined. When that data set is well defined, it will be easy. The next thing is cybersecurity needs to take center stage, and the data protection and data privacy laws need also to get married somewhere. And we all agree that we don't share this information without consent. So in essence, there is a lot of technology is ready, but there is quite some work at policy level and at driver. This cannot be driven by any country in Africa. It must be driven at African Union level, and it must be a certain standard things must be defined. I will start with the best example of a passport and say, look, what is in this document that we share? What does it look like? What are the key indicators? Uganda having 1.5 million refugees is teaching us a lot about certain areas, because tomorrow that person returns to their country and you have their birth certificate and it cannot be verified. So we are starting a small journey there to see if we can standardize the documents around what is in our neighboring countries and begin to prepare to share at least the refugees' documents when they return home. Thank you.
Such an important perspective. And thank you so much for framing it as that the technology is ready. We now need the policy to catch up. And hopefully that, in keeping up with timeliness, we don't make the same mistake we did with the African Union Convention on Personal Data Protection and Cybersecurity. That only had countries like Ghana run off with it and the others didn't sign it up in time. And now we've all developed different laws. But that's really important as a takeaway, at least at this point. So Yodehe, what is the understanding of DPI within Ethiopia's context?
So it's a relatively new term to begin with, but it's been floating around, the idea of building systems that are not interoperable, everybody doing their own verticals, like the health sector building its own vertical and education doing its own vertical, no interoperability, lack of interoperable layers, avoiding effort duplication, reusable modules, reusable blocks. All of these concepts have been floating around, and the idea of having a national digital stack. We have this, the Kenya stack, the Ethiopia stack, the India stack, etc. So all of these are ideas that kind of capture what we mean by DPI. In Ethiopia, right now we have a digital council that's trying to make sure, we call it Digital Ethiopia Council, that's trying to make sure that all of our efforts in digital kind of feed into each other, avoiding effort duplication, budget duplication, because we have a lot of investment in ICT, while focusing on the core aspect of digital service delivery, especially e-government services. So we have a council that's up and running. It's established under the Deputy Prime Minister's office, and the council has published its principles, most of which, thankfully, we were able to adopt the good practices within the DPI framework. So yeah, that's where we are essentially as a country on DPI, and we believe we are positioning ourselves to be able to leverage all of these foundational components of the DPI layers.
Right, and in fact, Ethiopia stands as an exemplar of adopting a module that has been exemplified as a DPI, and specifically because you oversee the Ethiopian National ID program. Do talk to us about how, rolling it out as a DPI has been. Was this coming on the back of a previous ID project, or is this also just brand new? So therefore you're building without sort of like the legacy of other infrastructures?
So when we launched the current version of the Digital ID project, sometime in 2022, maybe late 2021, we were not really encumbered by a very big legacy system. The idea of building a national level standardized identification has been around, but no system existed prior to the launch of this digital ID. So it's technically a greenfield project. So that obviously it has its drawbacks and its benefits as well. The previous thought behind building an ID system at the national level was mostly focused on avoiding or catching identity theft, avoiding fraud, focused on security aspects, etc. But lately, not only in Ethiopia but elsewhere, the focus has been more on service delivery and KYC, know your customer, and virtual access to services, single sign-on, all of these things. So we have taken advantage of this, the latest trend in digital identity, to build our services, digital ID, around eKYC and service delivery. So yeah, it's technically a greenfield project, which is now 3 years old.
Talk to us about, what are the lessons learned so far in trying to roll it out? What have been the successes, the challenges, any risks or trade-offs? And I would mention one in particular. How are you finding the, readiness and, trustworthiness of rolling out such systems within the populace? Because trust is usually a big determinant of success for many of these projects.
Right. So we obviously challenged. There are many. One aspect is the trust aspect, like you mentioned, awareness. Why is the government asking me to give them all these fingerprints and face data and all of this? People sometimes get curious. Obviously, privacy is also an important aspect. The good thing is things a little bit came together as far as privacy and the legal aspects is concerned. We recently had a very good standard privacy law, which is pretty much similar in terms of principles to the privacy law that exists in Kenya and elsewhere. Also the famous GDPR, etc. We also have our ID law, which we crafted carefully. We did not say it's universally mandatory. We did not make, because it makes people feel when you tell them, the first thing you tell them, it's mandatory to get digital ID. Obviously, questions arise. So we made sure that it can be connected to basic services, banking, telco, government services like tax, social services. But we've kind of made it mandatory indirectly by leaving it to the sectors. Say, for instance, you are in charge of social subsidies. So the regulator there can say, I'll make this digital ID, we call it FIDA here. I'll make FIDA a mandatory document to offer my services. And when they make that decision, obviously, they also take a responsibility of making sure that they don't risk exclusion. The fear of exclusion should not be there. So if you make it mandatory for social services, you have to make sure that all of your beneficiaries can readily and easily access the digital ID. So we kind of did put in that kind of check and balance in there. So there is, as far as the public opinion is concerned, there is a good level of interest, in fact. The only question we get asked is, why are you still at 10 million? Why is the whole population not registered already? You're too slow. There's a kind of complaint that should come from our principals. It's coming from the public. So trust and awareness wise, we're okay. Obviously, there are many challenges. One of which is, do we do the verification prior to issuing the digital ID or post after issuing the digital ID? By verification, I mean the background checks. Say, for instance, someone presents a document and wants to register for FIDA. How do we do an authentication check on that document? Because we accept by design, it's inclusive. So we accept all sorts of documents, your resident city ID, your driver's license, your school ID, employee ID, all sorts of documents. We even accept testimonial written by your office that I testify that this person is who they claim to be, etc. So we take all sorts of documents. So we made the decision to do any kind of background check or verification if there is fraud, etc. After issuing the digital ID, which obviously is challenging for some institutions. So the challenge one would be how institutions, government agencies do business, especially when it comes to connecting to FIDA. It's now different. There is obviously there is a natural resistance to change with some agencies, which we're solving one by one. The other challenge would be cyber security aspects, because we're collecting a lot of personal data, sensitive biometric data, which if once leaked, once hacked, there's no way of turning it back. So cybersecurity is a risk that we have identified. I would not say a challenge, but it's a very big risk. Also, the social aspects, socialization, it's a continuous work that we have to do. People need to understand that we're rolling this out. as part of building a strong digital economy, building the DPI stack. So yeah, this is what we're working on.
Wonderful. And do you give a physical ID as well, or it just stays as a digital ID, a non-tangible, instrument?
So on that one, the ID has been issued, means the person has successfully registered. So that means they have an ID on the law. And we've said we call it the ID credential, which is the card. The ID credential is optional because Ethiopia, one, we have subnational entities, regional governments that issue residential IDs. So our approach is the residential ID its address-based identity that they issue should be based on FIDA. So it kind of serves, like in the case of the US, for example, there is the states. Each state issues its driver's license, whatnot, based on social security number. So a kind of, or like the India Aadhaar model. So it's a little bit similar. That's why we're not pushing the physical card universally, but we have a physical card available. You can order it online and pay for it a reasonable amount, and then through the local national post, Ethio Post, and other partners, we're delivering the cards for those who want it. But the kind of direction we want to push is virtual verifiable credentials. So digital credentials that people can download on their smartphones or hold on a cloud wallet. So that's the kind of vision we have as far as credentials are concerned.
That's powerful and a paradigm shift because we're so used to ID being first in a physical document. In closing, let me ask you this, Yodahe. You're in Ethiopia, I'm in Kenya. What do you think it will take for us to use these digital IDs to, cross each other's borders? Not that we have barriers that are too high now, but we use passports. But what would it take, do you imagine, to get to a point where we are traveling or transcending borders using digital ID? And also, additionally, because, Addis is the seat of the African Union, what do you think could be ways to champion digital IDs to allow free movement of Africans as they adopt digital IDs?
Right. So we have the likes of the African Union, we have regional blocs, we have IGAD that Ethiopia is a part of and Kenya is a part of as well. You guys also have the East African community. So these blocs, they really have, when it comes to interoperability, ease of travel, we have the pacts such as AFCFTA, the Continental Free Trade agreement. So all of these things, ID plays an important role. Like take for the example of the East African community. One benefit you have, in addition to having a single passport, would be ease of travel. A trader from Uganda can easily go and trade in Kenya and vice versa. So identity is at the core of cross-border interoperability, increasing inter-Africa trade, etc. So obviously, there are initiatives. I know African Union is working on a framework for ID interoperability. They have a team working on ID interoperability. So we may not bring all 55 countries to do this at once, but regional interoperability, digital ID interoperability goes a long way into regional integration, trade integration, etc. So we should push all of these efforts. We have the AU 2030 agenda for digital ID. Everyone in Africa, all Africans need to get it at least because it's a human right as well. So we have we should all work on our own sovereign identity initiatives. Also other layers, not just ID. Other stacks of the DPI, they need to be interoperable cross border. So all of these things, every national state every sovereign government that's developing these DPI solutions, sooner or later, interoperability is not just between agencies, between health and education, but also between Kenya and Ethiopia. So that's, I think, the ultimate success of these initiatives.
Absolutely, because integration across Africa is an Agenda 2063 priority. And now we'll go into the Q&A session.